welcome this to be more of a discussion and question asking. What we're going to go through here is some of the common issues that we've seen. And what I mean by we've seen is issues that in the 6 years or so that I've done OMOP conversions, what are some of the challenges that I see around the world from people where we do assessments on their data quality. So like one of the questions earlier was, how do you guarantee that your conversion looks good? Well, and one of the things I said is bring in an external group to do the data quality assessment, right? So we do that a lot. I do that with a lot of my partners. I do that as part of education classes and all that fun stuff. So all of these are some of the common issues that we find. And I would love to hear, if you guys have similar challenges or if there are other challenges that you want to talk about that we can share together with each other, right? So I only listed like some of the bigger ones. I didn't list out, or I should say the team didn't list out. I didn't do any of this, okay? I didn't prep any of this. The team did. I gotta give credit where credit goes, right? So we only listed out some of the bigger ones that we constantly see. I'm sure there's a bunch more, but let's go through them and you guys tell me whether or not these are similar to you or if there are other ones that you see that you go, huh, I don't know how to deal with this. How would I deal with this, right? We can talk about them. So the person table, the biggest one that we have is that a lot of folks likes to still bring in people without a year of birth, okay? In the OMOP CDM, that is a rule. If you don't have a year of birth, then that person is out, okay? And I know that even within my own team or within IQVIA, we get that same question in debate. Why would I get rid of people that looks like a good patient just because they don't have a year of birth, right? That's what we always get. And it has to go again around observational research and the fact that we are doing research here and we are covering that 80% of the common observational research here. And most of the case, when it comes to observational research and real world evidence, we always want to know how old the person is, right? It makes a difference between, like a diabetic, it makes a difference between if you're 65 or if you're 18 and how to treat them. Or same thing with certain survival rates and everything, right? So therefore, there's a lot of our calculation that uses the person's age. So that's what the group says, and this was an Odyssey decision, that if you don't have a date of birth, we shouldn't bring you in because this is an observational research database. This is not a clinical trial decision tree, or this is not meant, you can use it for hospital management, but it is not meant for, all those other things. It is really meant for observational research. And I know a lot of people have started moving it towards other fields. But yeah, age group is fine. So age group is fine as long as there's an age range. So what you do is then you derive the year of birth, right? So I have a data asset that's like that too. They gave me an age range. They don't tell me exactly. You're either 18 to 20, and then you're 20 to 25, 26 to 30. So what we do is I just put in their date of birth as the 26, right? So I just put the year, basically their 26 years from today's date would be the year based on their age group, right? So that's what I do. And I put that there because I don't, what we don't do is I don't spread it between 26 to 30, because if I do that and somebody who tries to use this data doesn't realize that it's an age group to begin with, then they might think that, oh, wait, there are, 25,000 28-year-olds versus they are all really part of one age group and I really don't know their age. So I either use the low, like the 26, or the high of the 30. I don't split the people across. So that's how we've handled the whole age group. So you can have age groups. That's fine. You just have to create derived date of birth. Okay. So again, you may or may not agree with that, but that is the rule in Themis as well as the rule in OMOP. So please abide by that. Some of the ones in the condition occurrence, and you're going to find this theme a lot, and I'm going to stress this a lot, is that you're not providing the right standard concept ID, right? The correct standard vocabulary. in the condition concept ID. We get that a lot. A lot of folks really, when they say that I've converted my data into the OMOP CDM, they've taken the structure and moved their data into that structure, but they've not done the vocabulary portion of it. And why is that important? Well, within your local hospital or within your local organization, that's fine if that's what you want to use, and no one's stopping anybody, right? But if you're trying to do research with everybody else, that's not going to work, because what everyone else is expecting is that standard concept ID, right, inside that particular condition concept ID field. And a lot of people don't realize that you have to map them. So we've seen a lot where the source concept ID is put in there. And it's very easy. You just want to query to say that you go against the condition concept ID and you join it to the concept table, and where the concept, I think it's called the standard concept field is not S, right? And then you'll get a full list. So very quickly, that's how we QA that stuff. Very quickly, I get a full list of those that aren't standard. Okay, so that's something. The other one is always, if you don't have something, populate it with 0. So that's the other thing that we don't get. People don't populate it with 0. 0 is always okay. Okay. Foreign keys. Foreign keys are very common. Okay. Make sure you check your foreign keys, because we get a lot where you don't have provider, or I've actually seen cases where a person isn't in the person table. So it's kind of hard for you to do something when you have a person, a record in your condition occurrence table, but you don't know who the person is, right? So foreign keys are very important. Make sure you always check your foreign key constraints. Now, some of you guys may ask, but I'm in Oracle, I'm in SQL. That's a no-brainer, because in those databases, right, they do check. It's enforced. Your foreign key constraints are enforced. But when you're using more of the big data type of cloud-based platforms, they don't check those. So like Redshift does not enforce a referential integrity. So nor does things like Hadoop, because Hadoop is a file, right? It's not a database. Same thing with things like Netezza and all that. So again, that's why we tell you to check your foreign key constraints. If you're using Oracle and SQL or Microsoft SQL Server and you have it turned on, then you don't have to worry. But for all the other people that don't have it turned on, you might want to double check on that. Okay. Visit. So in visit occurrence, again, the whole foreign key constraint, right? So you'll notice a lot of these, like the shard to concept ID, they've done a lot of changes to the visit table. So if you, in the last year or so, if your OMOP CDM was mapped more than 2 years ago, you may want to go look at your visit occurrence table. They've changed like the visit type, like the place of service, as well as the types of visit that exist. They've standardized a lot of those in the last 2 years. And a lot of people don't realize that because it's not always communicated properly, right? And the vocabulary team doesn't always do a great job at telling everybody how to utilize it. But the visits have changed quite dramatically. We don't have place of services anymore. We have these new visit types that you can see here. That is what you should be using when you go fill in that visit table, and how they tie to the visit detail table. You need to reread that. There is a whole forum post about it. So if you guys did your OMOP CDM conversion more than 2 years ago and never updated it, you may want to look at your visit logic and how your visit is mapped based on the new logic that's out there. So the question is, when collaborating with researchers, do we get asked for data quality scores or any sort that's an 80-20 rule, or do we skew the results due to the data? So one of the other teachers, Silva, later on today, we'll talk about data quality. And in the community, we have developed, and it started because of the FDA. Actually, on the FDA BEST project, I'm asking us the question, how in the world do you guarantee your quality across all these sites in the US that you have on our program? They all convert their data, but how do I guarantee that they've done it the same way and that their quality is of high quality? Because I'm using you guys to do these guidelines on vaccines, right? And this was before COVID. They were doing vaccines on children guidelines and also blood transfusion. Now it's on COVID surveillance. So what we did back in 2019 after the Odyssey book hackathon was we had an impromptu meeting, and Patrick brought us all together and said, okay, from the original, we had a Themis hackathon a little bit before that in May, and we came up with all these rules and all these ways of defining quality based on all the conventions that we created, right? So that's when we developed then what we call the data quality dashboard. So when collaborating with researchers, especially those in the Odyssey community, they may ask you for your data quality dashboard results. The data quality dashboard, I won't go into too much because I will steal the thunder from Silva, but does have a ton of different type of checks in there that checks against, especially some of these common things that I'm talking about here. They are all part of the check that Silva will be going over with you guys later on. Okay. Drug exposure. To be very fair, the amount of errors that we get, they do vary amongst some of the amount of errors that I get. Actually, they're quite even amongst the procedure, the drug, the measurement, and the condition table. I think because those are the ones that everybody uses the most, that's why you get the most errors in there. Right. So hey, the drug exposure here, again, the same one. You're not mapping it to anything that should be standard. So you need to always check that it's mapped to a standard. The drug type concept ID, either it's not standard, it is not populated. A lot of people, there is a lot of confusion because when I think of drug type, the first thing I think of, especially in Asia, I don't know about about Australia and Singapore, but in Asia, when I think of drug type, I think of herbal versus Western medicine. Okay, right? Herbal medicine versus Western medicine, and that's what people put in here. That this is a Western medicine, this is an herbal medicine. That's what they put in here, and that's a mistake, of course. And I can tell you that's not captured right now. Herbal medicine in the vocabulary is a lot harder right now. When we were doing the vocabulary mapping for China, and I know Chan's not here, but I believe in Korea as well, we decided to ignore herbal medicine for now, right? So all of our vocabulary for the time being is just manufactured medicine that you can actually define, not the ones that my uncle has at his herbal store where I don't even know what in the world is in half of them. Okay. And you don't want to know either. Sometimes I see the word oxtail, and you're supposed to cook that in the medicine. Okay. So, but that's the type. So the type is really where the source of the data comes from. Is it coming from EHR? Is it coming from pharmacy? Is it coming from survey? Is it coming from a patient reporting it because maybe the patient reported it, right? So that's what the type is. And even though we only mention in the drug exposure table, it actually happens in all the other tables as well. So I have a question here. With the example you mentioned, right, change in visit, how do you manage change management? A lot of old queries analysis needs to be changed. Yes, especially if they modify like the vocabulary types. So like the visit stuff, my team had to go back once we found out about it, and we maintain about 15 different data assets around the world. We had to go back and rework all of the visit logic for all 15 of them. How do you know about them? And that's something that how do you know about when they're changing? So one is the CDM working group. They do notes, and they do provide some of that information. The community calls is where you can also find out that information. So like earlier in one of the APAC community call, I talked about the changes to v5.4, right? In the past, they have not been very good at communicating any of these changes out. I can tell you that. So one of the one of the actual goals of the CDM working group is to do better at communication. So that's why they're choosing to come onto the community calls, working with me on the Asia Pacific side so that we all know. So I go to those CDM working groups calls. They're every Tuesday at 1 a.m. 1 a.m. Beijing time. So I don't think any of you guys want to go to those. But we try to, you know, keep everyone apprised and keep everyone updated on that now going forward, because that is something that we've heard about, that, you know, we make all these changes and nobody knows about them, right? So whenever I hear about them, I will bring them up in the APAC community call. So my suggestion to you is go to the APAC community calls, or you can look at the ones that are in the, and they're all recorded. So if you don't know about those at this point in time, both the global one and the Asia Pacific ones are recorded. You can just go here this week, and then there's the Odyssey normal community call, and they tell you what they're doing. And then also the APAC ones, we also have a list here of what we're doing and what we're doing. So like 2 days ago, we talked about what the global symposium agenda was going to be, right? And the next one, in not this coming week, but the next week, we're going to give some global working group updates. And I think it's on, I can't remember. I think one of them is the EHR one, actually. I gotta remember what those are. But you can, and the one that is on the Asia Pacific Standard Time one, let me see, it's 8 p.m. my time. So that's 11 a.m. Beijing time. So 12 o'clock Korean time, and I think it's 1:30 Australian time. I think I did my math right, but I don't know. So that's where you can go to get that information. Okay. Quantity. So sometimes, and we just talked about this earlier, right? Sometimes the quantity isn't always filled in. You have to derive that. And if you really don't, and it has to be greater than 0, okay? That's the one thing. We see a lot of negative quantities in there. Now, I have seen a lot of decimals in the quantity. And at one point in time, when I did some of the data quality check, I was wondering, why do you have 0.0833333333 of for the quantity. So those are some of the quantities you might want to look at and question, right? Because normally I think of like half of a dose, like half of a pill or a third of a pill. But when I see like 0.083333, I start wondering, is that really a valid value? So you personally, you know, within your group, you can write code in there to say, hey, give me the distinct list of drug values or drug quantities that's less than, let's just say, a third or something like that. And then you can look at that and say, hey, do these really make sense? Now, I have learned that those 0.083333 do make sense. I was told that they take a pill, they smash it, and then they weigh it out, and that's how much they give them. Okay, something like that I personally have not experienced myself, but okay, makes sense. So cool. But we do not take negatives because, again, I know in claims data, like in the United States, we have claims data and we do have negatives in there because I don't know about where the claims elsewhere, but what we call reversals or rejections, right? So basically, let's just say they filed a claim, but the patient never picked up their prescription. Right, so then you have a positive one in there for a prescription, but then they reverse it out because they never picked it up, so then that claim doesn't count. But then that shows up in the claim system. So in that case, then they didn't take it or they didn't pick it up. And most of the time, the claim system will come clean it up the next month. And the percentage of those negatives are about like 0.0001% of our claims. So that's why we have a rule in here to say, hey, look, those should just never show up because, again, we're doing observational research. And maybe we do have, you know, an extra claim and an extra prescription in there for that patient. But statistically, will that really damage my research? Probably not. So that's why we say we don't accept negative values. And that's true for all of the transaction tables. So you can't have a negative procedure, you can't have a negative device, you can't have a negative, well, you can have a negative measurement, I take that back, but you can't have a negative drug, okay? So that's that. The drug exposure, they started adding this start date and time in v 5.3.1. And we have to make sure that you set it up properly, right? Because if you use the calculation of this, and if you program it in, and if it's 1 day, if you don't set the time properly, then it won't actually end up as 1 day. So you got to make sure that your start date time is set up properly when you don't have a start date time. Like all my data, all of our data assets, I don't have a start date time. Hospital data, you guys probably have one, right? I only get a day. I only get one to say they went in that day and they got discharged that day, okay? So you have to say, well, then I have to calculate it's really, you know, midnight or 1 to midnight the next day, right? That's my start and end date, because then that's 1 day. Or else if I say 0 to 0, then it may calculate as 2 days, depending on the way your calculation works. So those are things you have to watch out for. Okay, day supply, same thing as what I said earlier. We do not like negatives. Again, there shouldn't be a negative day supply, and it typically happens with claims, right? And it can happen in EHRs as well, because maybe it was entered in an error and then removed. But then again, that's entered in error, so you should just remove it. Okay. Let's see. Silva posted something. It's not the missing per se, because the outpatient medication it's usually a one-time dispensing. But what is the question here? Sorry. Trying to see what the question was that was posted.
The question was on for outpatient, how do we infer the drug end date?
How do you infer the drug end date? So we have, so if you have the day supply, then that's how you would infer it, right? You have to build that logic in, okay? It's all based on your database and all about the rules within the data that you know. So like in UK, it doesn't give me a day supply. It's a box, but I know, so I have to calculate the day supply based on the box and the instructions that was given to me, like take this, 3 times a day, right? And then I can calculate the day supply. So then I can calculate my end date. Okay, so it's a bunch of logic that you actually have to calculate. In the US, it's much easier. They give me the day supply. So in the US, I don't know about you guys, but I know one thing that's very different that surprised me is you guys get boxes. I don't get boxes. I get actual dispensing containers of a 30-day supply of a drug. Okay, and that's how much I get. So if it already said, if it tells me that I'm supposed to take it 3 days or 3 times a day, and I'm supposed to take it for 30 days, I get a little jar of 90 pills. And it says on there, day supply 30, okay, and quantity of 90. So by having that, I can calculate how much I'm supposed to take a day, right? Unless it's a titration one. So it's all calculated, and you have to build all that into your ETL logic. So it depends on how you guys operate in what information you have and how it operates. And if you don't have it, then you can do defaults. So if you know your drugs, like for example, I know that, ladies, right, we take birth control pills, and those are typically 28 days. So I would default that, right? So those are some of the rules that you have to come up with.
But that is assuming that patient compliance is there, right? Mm-hmm. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is Yiming from Singapore. So based on your description, it actually under an assumption that patient compliance to the days that they are supposed to take. But unfortunately, some of the patients, they don't comply to the instruction given to them. So let's say they once upon collecting the drug from the pharmacy store, they went back home, but they don't follow the instruction given to them. So if we so-called like what you say calculated from the let's say 30 days as an instruction, the information may not reflect what the patient's journey. So in that case, can we just record the date of dispensing, but not record our forecast days that the patient should follow, so as to better reflect the truth.
Yeah, so that's been brought up before, right? And with the OMOP CDM, there are certain assumptions that we do make. Like that is one, because the problem is we have no way of figuring out whether or not they took it or not, right? Because there's no way you can
follow
I don't call, even if I call, they may not tell me. They're not going to tell me the truth anyway, right? So,
we can never find out the truth.
Correct. So therefore, we in the community, they have basically decided that we're going to go with the assumption that they did do it all, take it all. Because if they did not, then I would see another record, right? I typically would see another record when you're trying to do like an adherence and persistent, right? And a compliance type of analytic. You can see, because you can see when they filled it the first time, and then you can see when they filled it the next time, and you can see when they filled it the third time. Even though we have an end date, right? We know that they picked it up, day 1 of month 1, but then they didn't pick up the second one until day 15 of month 2. Then you know they weren't 100% compliant with that, right? So that's when we would use the report, the prescription pickup dates to run a compliance report and an analysis on that. But still, we would still populate, this is what we expect the end date to be. Now, if you have a verbatim stop date, because there is one in there, and if the patient does somehow tell you, right, because some people somehow does have that information, there is a verbatim end date in the system that you can put in. But the assumption here is that the end date is always calculated and derived, assuming that the patient took the drug according to what they were supposed to do. So that's the assumption that we make in the OMOP CDM.
So can we choose not to put the end date, just the day we dispense the medication?
I think the end date is required. I'm not too sure. If it's not required, then yes.
Hey,
I just don't remember if it's required or not.
Hey,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
So I think maybe the intent was like, let's say like there is something, adverse reaction or something, and we need to study something. Maybe they wanted to do the best case scenario, but in Athena, I searched for adherence, and there are like, concepts saying like, device adherence, like no adherence, like that. Maybe it looks like, it is being looked into, and then maybe, that may, whatever value you are trying to bring into the data, right? So you have like one more piece of information that may get added to the data. In Athena, I find.
Well, see, I know there was a debate about the end date, and I know this was within the All of Us groups when they were doing it, and that's a US-based network. Federal network, right?
Yeah.
And they're the ones who brought up, because at one point in time the end date was not required, but I believe they're the ones who brought up the use case as to why it's required. And I wasn't part of that debate, so I don't know why it's required. But we can go out there and ask them, hey, why is it required? So I don't know. Jing, can you look up if it's required?
Selva here. Drug exposure end date is required. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that changed in V5.3.1, but I wasn't too sure. So yeah, we can go ask them, right? We can ask the CDM groups why that's required, but because it's required, you would have to put something in.
Okay, because I know for inpatient medication, usually the start date and end date are very accurate and clear, because before the discharging, they need to end the inpatient medication. Yeah, so when I first look at the start date and end date medication, I naturally thought it is for inpatient medication. But for outpatient, since we can't really track their adherence. So I have been thinking what end date I should put for outpatient medication. Okay.
Yes, so we do it based on a calculation, but like I said, most of us will calculate the adherence based on the start dates. We don't, like when I do adherence and persistence and compliance calculation, I don't look at the end date. I only look at the start date because that's the date that I can 100% trust, right? And I also look at what the supposedly day supply is because I can also trust that. Right, and then go based on that. Are you 50% compliant, 75% compliant, or excellent? I personally have not done a research that uses the end date, but hey, it was added as required, so there must be someone else that does it. Doesn't mean that that use case doesn't exist. I just don't know what that use case is, why they required the drug exposure end date to be added.
Okay, thank you for the discussion anyway.
Oh no, this is good. I want this type of discussion, right? Mark, you had something.
Yes, just some personal opinions about this issue. I believe for this kind of a so-called real-world data research, it will always be a problem about the patient's compliance. So our assumption is that patient will follow doctor's rule, but unfortunately, it's not always the truth. But
doesn't reflect
that's why maybe
list.
Yes, that's why
may not reflect.
Randomized control study or clinical trial is still the gold standard. But I think using the observational health data, there is some convenience. So I believe that actually we still need clinical randomized trial study and clinical trial, because all compliance actually are made sure by all the clinicians. But I believe there is still some good point for this kind of observational health study. That's my personal opinion.
No, thank you for that, Mark, and I agree with you, right? If you really want to look at, I mean, we're not here to replace clinical trials. We're not here to replace half of the other studies that are out there, right? You're still going to have to do certain studies where you collect a lot of this data, right? And I've seen that before even in our group. Like you said, most of the folks that ask us to do the research, it's not going to be on that type of matter, or it's a start to get them to a point where then they can take it a further level with the clinical trials. So I've done that before, where we help them to start the research to say, hey, based on everything that I've been able to find, these are the patients that might be useful for you. And then they go on and more like patient identification, right? And then they move on into the clinical trial portion of it. Stephen, I saw you did have your hands up. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to share my thought that because actually, if we want to know that the exact adherence for the patient, actually only clinical trial can do it. And because in pharmacoepidemiology study that we will use the MPR, the medication precision ratio, and even the PDC, the proportion of days covered. It also based on the prescription that you can follow in that period. So I think that we just look at the prescription first day and then their drug supply day is also okay for us to know their adherence for this medication.
Yeah, that's normally what I do, or at least I shouldn't say me. I should say the research that the team does. Right? It's always looking at the drug start date and the day supply. We don't look at the end date for adherence, compliance, or persistence. When the team runs that, when we have requests to run that type of analysis. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful discussion. Oh no, please bring that up. Keep bringing those type of discussions up, because it helps everybody, right, better understand where where you can use it, where you can't, because I always say this to everybody, the OMOP CDM and the observational research and real world evidence is not meant for everything. It's not going to cover everything, and I hope folks understand that. But, you know, folks need to understand where we can cover and where we can't cover, right? So this is a great discussion on what it can cover and what cannot. Again, I don't know why the drug exposure end date is required, so I will go figure that out with the CDM folks and get back to you guys. I honestly was not part of that conversation, so we will take that as an action item. Okay. So the next one, drug exposure or device exposure. This is one that we get a lot where it's less than 1, or it's not even filled in, because I've seen a lot of records where they just have a record of the device, but they don't have the quantity. So then by default, folks don't fill in the quantity. But in our case, again, this is another assumption, right? If you have a record of a device, then we assume that that was one device. So you need to populate it with 1, right? So that's one of the CDM rules that we have. And like I said, a lot of these CDM rules are based on the people who's been using the OMOP CDM, in this case, a lot on the Western side of the world, right? And maybe some of these rules do need to change with the Asia Pacific side. And that's why we're doing this, right? Because we would love to see a lot more usage of the OMOP CDM. And if they don't fit into, you know, the standards that we have now, bring them up, because then maybe they do need to change, because there are a lot of differences between the Asia Pacific side and the Western Hemisphere. Like, you know, like I said earlier, drugs, right? We have herbal drugs and they don't. And how do you handle that, right? So, and then the third table that, or some of the other stuff we have in here, you have the death. Oh, I get this a lot too. So I call them zombies. I call them walking zombies. I get a lot of data assets, and when we review a lot of this stuff, I see a lot of walking zombies in the data. And basically, we have a rule that we put in place to say, do I trust the death information? Because that's the other thing that you have to ask, right? How do I know that the death information that I'm given can be trusted? Okay. And the rule that we came up with is that basically, originally they thought about 30 days, so we said 60 days. If you have events after 60 days of the person's death date, then we don't think that person's dead. So you might want to revisit your death date, right? And why do we give a 60-day? Because we took into account things like the person is now deceased, but then you have autopsies, or if it happens to be a crime of some kind, then, right, they are given a bit more time to resolve all that. So we took all that into account, and that's why we say 60 days. So what we've seen, and we did a network study around this to say, okay, how many, you know, of the, again, Western Hemisphere databases, you know, how many days after death do we have records? And it came up to somewhere, I think, in the 40s or something. So we put it out to 60. So there's a rule in there that says, if you're after 60, we expect that this person is not deceased, and you may want to look at your death date. So there's that rule. There should be no record after 60 days. And that's what these are. And we do see a lot of data all over the world. This isn't just in Asia Pacific or anything, all over the world where that record comes up. And we've asked people, why is that the case? And, you know, a lot of them are errors. They go, well, I don't know how this death date went in. Some of them are not. So you really have to think about it. Again, we are about observational research. Sometimes there are transactions on that patient record that really isn't about that patient, right? But they recorded it in the EHR, so they want to capture it. And our recommendation there is you don't want to capture those, because, again, they're not about the patient. This is an observational database. It's about the patient. It's very patient-centric. And we don't want to have any records in there that's not about the patient. And that's happening to the patient, I should say, not about the patient, but that's happening to the patient. And because the patient is deceased, you shouldn't have any more records after 60 days, right? But again, all of these are rule of thumbs. Doesn't mean, you know, if your database doesn't pass it, and you guys may have reasons for not doing it. That's what Silva will talk about later on. It will show up in the data quality dashboard to show us that you do have stuff in there that doesn't meet some of those rules. Okay. Not saying that you have to change it, but those rules will show. It will show up. It's best if you change it, but hey, everybody has their own rules, and everybody has their own, you know, ways of utilizing their data, right? Observation period. The one that we get a lot is people don't have an observation period, because a lot of times, and this happens a lot with EHR, because with EHR, you don't know when their observation period is, right? They go in the hospital, they go out, they go in the hospital, they go out, they go in the hospital, they go out. How do I know when they were observed in the database? So for the observational databases, when it comes to EHR data, there's a rule of thumb that says it's the start of their first transaction to the to the date of their last transaction. That's basically what their observation period is. And a lot of people aren't aware of that, or there's actually logic for that somewhere. So they don't fill it in. But observation period is required in the database, or for the OMOP CDM. So make sure you populate that. And then the other one is there are events outside of the observation period, and we've had that before. But we've also changed that in Themis, that you can now have records outside of the observation period. See, originally, so this is something that's changed recently, right? Or I shouldn't say recently, 3 years ago or something like that. And this is in UK. It started out with UK, because UK, like I mentioned earlier, when you go to a practice, you only have their records within that practice, okay? And that's when you are observed, right, by that particular practice. But then when you go to another practice, what they typically do is when you go to the other practice, because your medical record does not go with you. So in the United States, if I transfer, I can request for my entire medical record to go to my new doctor, okay? Yes, you're getting that confusing look. In the UK, at least this is what I was told, okay? Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I'm told. You go over to a new doctor, your medical record doesn't go with you. What you get on the first day is a survey that or a history file that you have to fill out to say what you used to have. Okay, what were you diagnosed with? What did you take? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, that information is keyed into the system, but that information is not factual to when you were observed in that particular practice. So all that information is keyed in, but it's before you were observed in that practice. So it's all outside of your observational period, okay? So for a while there, that was the debate, and therefore that rule has now changed, that we allow for transactions outside of the observational period, because they don't want to lose all that history, right, of everything that happened to that patient, because even though it's patient reported, but it's all that history, but it's before they started at that clinic. Does that make sense? I hope so. So again, those are things you have to watch out for. Measurements. Whoa, measurements. Get a lot of this. We have negative values or null values. There is a list of measurements that Vortec spent time on and running. Vortec is a research analyst from the NIH and really big on measurements, and he wants to make sure everybody is using the right measurements. So he did a network study, a federated network study, asked all of us for our measurement values and which one of them should be negative and which one of them should not be, right? So therefore, he wrote in a bunch of standards for that already. And the value, there are only a handful, I think there's like no more than 20 measurements that we found that allows for negatives. So that's something we check. So that's something the data quality dashboard checks. If you are outside of those 20 or so, if you have a negative, then we're going to ask you why you have a negative value. Okay. So I see I have questions here. Mui, what is the exact issue with the observation window? But I think if you just record them outside the window, then they don't show up. Well, they show up, and because at one point in time, it's the definition of the observation period, right? The definition of the observation period, according to OHDSI, is it's a time in which the patient was observed inside the database. So because you're observed inside that database, you shouldn't have anything outside. And they use that for figuring out something like if you're what we call new to a drug, right? Because sometimes people call it a clean period or look back period, right? That's what we use the observation period for, to figure out if you were newly diagnosed, new to the prescription, new to something. That's why we need the observation period. And that's why we need to understand when your observation period is. So when you have records outside of your observation period, that kind of throw things off, right? And that's why they have that issue with the observation period, and that's why they've always expected all of your transactions to be within your observation period window, because the assumption is you're not inside your observation period window, then I don't know, I can't assume that you didn't take that drug, right? I can't assume that you didn't take that drug because I didn't see you in my database. That's why they wanted everything within that observation window. All the other records will show up in Atlas as well. It's not that it doesn't show up, they do show up. It's when you actually use the observation inside Atlas, then it will filter out the other ones. But if you don't use the observation period, because by default it just says anything before and anything after, right? Then then the observation period doesn't kick in. So you really have to look at what you're doing in Atlas if you want that observation period. But a lot of times, again, the observation period is for finding, like I think I have one right now that says, hey, they want to find a baseline, right? They said, I want people who took this drug and then baseline them 6 months back. Well, 6 months back, that means they have to be in the system for 6 months, right, before that. So that's when you would use the observation period.
So what we actually considered doing was just changing the observation period essentially to match each patient's lifespan. So say the observation period starts essentially when they're born, because we get so much historical data coming into a GP practice that that would be outside of when they were there. Is that valid? Or like against the idea of what the observation period should be?
So it depends. If you change it to when they were born, but like, do you know whether or not that person is seeing that particular practice or in your system since when they were born?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Most of the time they would not have been seen by that practice until like the first time their visit data shows up. But because they do fill out the form that says, what other drugs did you take in the past? What conditions were you diagnosed with in the past? All of that stuff happens before their first visit. And then in Atlas, we're like, oh, how come we've only got 2,000 people diagnosed with hypertension when we've got 20,000 in the raw records if you just do a query against your Cdm. And we figured that was probably the reason, although we're not certain. So that's...
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be. So yours is very similar to the UK, right? So the observation period should be when they were observed, right? And then the other records are still before the observation period, but that shouldn't impact your query inside your Atlas. You have to make sure when you do the Atlas, it's the any day before and any day after the observation period, and then it shouldn't matter when the observation period is. So when you're in Atlas, let me go to my Atlas. Atlas, come up, please. Now you guys are getting a course on Atlas. Added bonus. I remember my own password as well. Really bad at remembering things. But when you do the cohort definitions, like when you do a new, it's right here, right? It says at least 0 days before or 0 days after, right? You would just, if you set it to 0, or I think there's a way to do any, no, 0 works. So this basically doesn't take into account the observation period at all.
Okay.
So it only takes into account if you start doing like 180 days. That means they have to have been observed in your data for 180 days, half a year, right? Or if you say after, that's a year after, right? After the actual initial event. So that's the only time that the observation period would kick in if you don't set this.
So we've got the IQVIA hypertension query that we're running to test this. So I assume that has its cohort defined as part of it. Can I just check it there in the cohort section to see what they've got set up in the pre-done query?
Yeah, that's a Jing question. She's the one who wrote that, so you would have to ask Jing about that. And that query is based on the definition that the study people wanted. They basically want someone that's been observed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you would have to ask Jing about that. Sorry, I don't know enough about that study protocol.
That's fine. Thanks.
Cool. You're welcome. Let's see, did I answer everyone's questions? I think I did. Cool. Okay. All righty. That's observation period, measurement. Event tables. So we talked about this quite a bit already, so I won't beat up on this one too much. It's your domain. We get that a lot, that they're going to the wrong domain, right? Because they don't look at the domain of the standard concept ID. And it may be a observation, but I still see it in the condition table. So again, you can query all that and see and make sure those are in place. Now, some of the issues that we talked about, but then how to solve some of those problems, right? So no standard vocabulary, we kind of talked about this quite a bit. One, there are multiple ways of doing this. One, you can have your own mapping team, right? So this is what Chan was showing you guys yesterday, how to do, it using Usagi, or you can manually do it yourself. Depends. Like some of ours, like our specialty mapping, we don't use Usagi. We just because it's the list of specialty is quite short, right? So we just manually do it ourselves. Some things we do use Usagi for, some things we do not. Now, if you want the help, like I mentioned, the vocabulary team decided to sign themselves up. There is a way to work with the vocabulary team, especially if you have a ton of them. They can help you guys. They can actually even load up your proprietary ones out there. So that may be something that most folks don't understand. In Athena, even though the vocabulary here, some of these are proprietary. How do I know? Because I have one in here that's proprietary. Okay, like this one. This is, you see the words that says IQVIA next to them? These are proprietary to us. And if you have it, you have the license to it, because I work with them. They put it out in there, so then my clients, our folks can all download it, right? So you can put your proprietary ones out there as well, and you just have to work with them and say it requires a license. They have a certain format you have to put it in. There is a whole wiki page on what the format looks like, but once you give it to them, they can load it up like that, right? There are some other ones like the VA, like this one's for the VA. This one happens to be free, but it is for the VA. Look, the Brazilian Unified Health System. So that requires a license, right? There are different ones in here that requires license. I know there was ones that were in Korea that requires the license, but I guess those might have been opened up now. But yeah, you can load in the national ones, like, NCCD, those are the national ones that we worked with, ICD-10 CN. I know ATM is in here somewhere for Australia as well, because I remember working on that. But you can also put in proprietary ones. But again, you have to work with the vocabulary team on that. And they prioritize. Sometimes they can help you with the mapping. They do prioritize. I have to say, the vocabulary team does belong to a company overall. They do like us, they do a portion of the work for free, and then they do a portion of the work as paid, right? So of course, paid clients comes first. But they do prioritize if there is a need by multiple groups, right? So if all of Asia Pacific goes in there and say, we need this thing, and then we put a little pressure on them, then they'll do it, right? But again, they can help with some of the translations, they can help with some of that, but then they do have a specific format. I can find the link to it. Christian sent it to me once. The link to the format and how you have to put everything in, and then just give it to them and they'll load it into Athena. And if you guys, give it to them every quarter, then they'll include it in their release. Some of them they maintain, some of them you guys have to maintain. Some of the ones that I showed you, actually Odyssey pays them to do it. So there's that as well. So again, you can have your own mapping team. You can actually talk to them about, hey, you guys map it yourself, and they can help you verify it as well. So that actually works as well. So as I mentioned here, there's verified translated terms. So like the ones in China, we had the Odyssey China community do it, and then I sent it to them, and they helped me verify, and they came back with, hey, some of these don't look right. Can you guys help us recheck? So they've done all that before. Okay. So that's one of the solutions. Normal values. Again, we get a lot of these, a lot in all the different tables. It's really, you have to be able to write queries about all this stuff and look at it. So like even year of birth, right? Even though you might populate and it's required, but putting something before 1900s doesn't seem too realistic, or future dates. So those are things we check as well, right? I know, the lifespan of humans have gone quite far, but 1900s, that means you're 121 right now. Hey, I would love to live until 121, okay? I mean it. Well, maybe, I don't know. By that time, I might not be able to walk anymore. So, but so those are things we do check, and those are things you might want to check. Issues like we mentioned earlier, negatives, zeros, decimal points, right? Those stuff you might want to check. I don't know, like device exposure, right? I expect device exposures to all be full digits, full integers. Maybe there's a half of a heart monitor. I don't think there's such a thing as a half heart monitor, but again, I'm not a medical person, so I can't say there isn't. But those are things that you might want to check, and there's a lot of that. 122. Yes.
So it's possible, but it's only 1%, so it's probably not the case.
Yeah. And then the other thing I do find is futuristic birthdays. I do have people that are born in 2025. I'm like, wow, cool. We can predict the future. Awesome. Can you predict when I'm going to win the lottery? Please let me know, because then I wouldn't be working anymore, right? So those are things, again, those are a lot of those. Some of those are in the DQD, and like I said, Silva will go over some of them. But some of them, you really have to think about your own data and put your own medical team's practice into it, right? Things that you want to ask during the analysis. Those are some of the stuff that you want to ask during analysis. Does these make sense, right? Like I mentioned earlier, the drug exposure quantity that I saw once before, .0833333. Again, I'm not a medical person. I don't work in a hospital, so that to me seems very off, that you would have a quantity of 0.0833333, and it was a pill. It wasn't a solution. It was a pill. So I found that very odd, right? So I asked those type of questions, and then I started writing queries against things like that and building those upon our own checks. So we just keep building upon them, and all that is going to be iterative. You're not gonna solve all of that in one day. Okay. We talked about this already, the wrong concept type. So I really suggest that you guys go to Athena, find the right concept types, as well as look at the wiki site, because the wiki site will give you a list of the correct concept types for every single one of the tables. Okay. Let's see, missing Cdm tables. Oh, I get this a lot too. Tables that are missing. So there is this thing called MVP. So again, we deal with what we call MVP, right? In my group, we have an MVP. Our MVP is if I can populate the drug table, the conditioner table, and all the other lookup tables that goes with it, that's my MVP. If I'm trying to convince somebody to convert over to OMOP and utilize it and quickly be able to use it and see the benefits of it, that's what I do. Now, doesn't mean that there's not a phase 2 to it, because once I convince them, now they utilize it, they see the benefits of it, whether it be an academic institution or a commercial institution, because I do work with a lot of academic institutions, and that's the first thing they ask me, right? And I'm going to go over, it's one of the ones on here. It takes a long time to do a conversion. It does. Because all the stuff that I just talked to you about, it's not a one-time shot. you are continuously improving your CDMs. Some of my CDMs we've had in place for 5 years now, and it constantly changes. Like right now, our US claims one is now changing because the way they deal with the benefits. They're changing it. So you're constantly having to update these things to match the CDM, as well as like at the beginning of the year, they added in a ton of more patients. So I now have to deal with all the mappings that may or may not exist for the drugs and so on, right? So it is a commitment. It is a commitment. It requires resources and it takes time. Okay. And it's very iterative. And the first time you guys do this, I can tell you that you probably will, maybe if you guys are really good at 60% of it is right. Okay. The other ones, you're going to have to do trial and error, play with it, go try using it, and then finding the problems, right? And then correcting it. So we get that a lot. Why in the world would I want to invest in something like this, right? And you're going to have missing tables, you're going to have that. But why we do the agile approach is you phase those things in. You phase those things out, phase them in, fix certain things, move them, and it's dynamic. You just have to have an end target and goal, right? So we have a lot of tables that do see people, you know, with missing tables. And sometimes they're saying, I'm done with the whole thing and this is everything. And they don't realize that, you know, you have to fill in the visit occurrence table because sometimes they don't have visits, right? They don't specifically spell out visits, but they don't realize that they derive that from all the other transactions that they have, right? Same thing with the observation period table, right? So a lot of these sometimes go missing. I would, again, go check, make sure you guys have what you need, check the CDM tables, understand what your MVP is, as well as what your roadmap is to build out a full functional CDM, right? So that would be the solution for you guys. The next one, we talked about this earlier, mapping to the wrong domain. So always check this little domain field for the standard and make sure it really maps. Like in this case, family history of hypertension. So in our case, it is not something that happened to the patient. So in many systems, many of the ICD systems, this is the diagnosis. But in OMOP, this is not a condition because it didn't happen to the patient directly. This is happening to somebody in the family. Okay. Therefore, it's an observation that someone in the family has hypertension. Okay. So that's why, even though the original one here is a condition, right? But when you move it to the standard, it moves to observation. So you need to make sure that you're always checking the domain of the standard. Now, earlier the question is, what if it's not mapped? Then you use the domain of whatever your source is. But that's only if it's not mapped. If it's mapped, you must use this. And this is something that everybody follows, so this is what we expect. So when we're running a query with you and we're looking for family history, we're going to write the query against the observation table. We're not going to write it against the condition table. So if you have it in the condition table, we're going to miss things. But it is, you do the start date and the end date if you don't have an observation period. Some people do, some people don't, right? So go ahead, figure it out what your logic is and plug in the right one. Okay, this one, lots of data. Okay, I get this a lot. A lot of people like we talked about right earlier, the patient doesn't having a birth date, we drop that, right? Or if you have negative value, we drop that. I've also had where the database, because it wasn't a very clean database, and we wrote in cleaning business rules to check. Basically, you have to look at certain statuses, certain flags, certain things to say these are valid patients. So then by that time, my record count dropped from the original source because we do a source to a CDM comparison, right? I literally dropped over 27% of the patients. And then more than 50% or I think it's 30 or 40% of the transactional records, because it's tied to patients that were not valid, right? So then when somebody sees that and they go, and they're so used to the source data, they see that and they're like, holy smokes, you dropped 27% of the patients. What in the world are you doing, right? So you have to spend the time actually convincing people and showing them, because why did we drop those patients, right? Because you don't use them in your analysis anyways, because they weren't valid patients. In your analysis, you actually build out the code to remove those patients and only find the valid ones. Why wait for you to do that during the analysis? Because everybody will write the analysis differently. Everybody will write the code to drop them differently. Might as well, when I do the Cdm conversion, I drop all of them, right? Because then you have a clean version and you know the code for dropping those patients are all the same, right? Person A and person B don't have to worry about that and don't have to interpret how I drop patients differently, right? So those are things that you actually have to explain to your stakeholders, and you actually have to do that part of your data quality checks and part of the demoing that you need to demo to your folks.
Hi, Mui. It's I'm seeing a black screen. Is that just me, or? Okay.
Does everybody still see me and the black screen, or do you guys see a black screen?
I see you and the black screen. I can't see the slides. Oh, never mind. It's probably
just you.
Okay, never mind. That got me scared once. All right, please continue. Sorry.
Oh, it did blink for a second, so maybe my internet went away and came back for a second. But those are my scenarios. You can see here there are scenarios that we've seen in hospital data. You have test patients in there, right? You want to remove those. Again, those things you have to, we build a lot of that. So what we say when we do an CDM conversion, it's not just about moving it and standardizing it. It's not just about moving the data from one format to the other and the vocabulary, standardization, and harmonization. It is actually about creating a research-ready database, okay? And removing things that you sometimes do during the research and writing the logic in there where we could pre-calculate all that beforehand, right? So those are the things that you have to talk to your business owners or your data owners about. Are there anything that you guys do all the time that you find that to be very annoying and that we could pre-process all that? So those are the things that you want to talk to them about, but also explain to them that by doing this, you're going to lose a bunch of records in here, but don't be worried. It's okay. It is what it is, right? So it takes a lot of time to explain all that. Wrong foreign key identifier and the date format. So those are the things that you have to check. Again, foreign key constraints, very important in a database, right? And then, as I talked about earlier, your event dates needs to make sure they're the right ones. And make sure that in your system that really calculates a day and it doesn't calculate into 2 days, because I've seen that before where we calculate it in 2 days instead of 1, and we've had to go back and change all of our logic. Okay, so that is everything that I have for that particular section. So now I believe I want to make sure I'm still on target. Sorry. Or am I behind? Maybe.
You were very accurate on time.
Whew. Wow, I'm good. All right. So now the fun part. Okay, like I said, we are not going to show you guys how to actually code. We're not going to actually sit here and code. Okay, but what I will give away is a bunch of tips on how to do ETL development. Right? We talked about analysis. That's 33% of your time. Now we're going to talk about development. A lot of this, I will just show you certain things, and you can ask a bunch of questions on here, because once we get off this call, I ain't answering your questions anymore. Okay, it's joking. You can still ping me, but what do you do when you do OMOP ETL development, right? And what do you kind of do? So what we recommend, again, this is just us recommending to you guys. You don't have to follow this method. You don't have to go down this path. It really depends on your environment, okay? We have a certain ETL workflow in place where my team operates, and then we have a certain flow that we do, right? So the first thing is to actually set up the whole environment, loading all of the stuff. Then we actually have staging tables. So we have the source table, we have staging tables, then we have the CDM tables. Because my team has done this for a long time, that they have different logic that goes into this, that goes from the source table to the CDM table or the staging table, and the staging table to the CDM, they're all the same rules. Okay, so we've gone through after so many conversions and decided that there are certain percentage of the rules are always the same. Okay, and those rules are the ones that we put from the staging table to the CDM table. Okay, so it saves us a lot of time. Okay, I don't have to recode all of that every single time. Okay, but what changes is some of the rules that are from the source to that staging table. Okay, I don't know if you guys are able to follow that, but that's how we have our environment set up. And then of course you have your QA and QC, right? So we do use what we call a continuous integration, continuous development, and deployment methodology, where we build, where we code, build, test, release, deploy. Okay, all in the same, all in the different environments that we have. Okay, we have many different environments, and that's what I'm going to show you here. So I have an environment called the sandbox, or I don't, the developers do. Then they have an environment called dev, then they have an environment called prod, then they have an environment called analytics. Okay, why do I have so many different environments? Because we don't like stepping on each other's toes. Okay, like I mentioned, we operate over 15 different data assets around the world, and they're huge. Most of them are in the terabytes. They're not in the gigabytes of any kind. And we have over 100 different people utilizing it. Jing's team, data scientist team, uses it every day. We have 2 data scientist team, one in the UK, one in China. And they're using all these different databases every single time. And every month, because there's 15 of them, we do quarterly refreshes, but I don't do all 15 of them every month, right? So we, there's like 3, 4, or 5 of them spread between the 15 every quarter. So 5 of them every quarter gets refreshed. So then you have 5 of them that's running at the same time as these developers. These data scientists are in there playing in the environment as me doing demos. Okay, that's a lot of toe stepping. And then of those 15 that are refreshed, some of them are actually enhanced. So then we're adding in the developers going in there and actually redeveloping some of the code, right? So you got a development team, a production team, a data scientist team, and crazy people like me. Okay, all in one at any day, anytime. So therefore, we have different environments set up for that particular reason. Okay, the sandbox is where our development team plays, and that's where they play in their own environment. Each person has their own sandbox. Okay, they play in there, they change their code. It's only the code that they're working on, because we can have multiple people working on the same database at the same time. Especially when I'm doing a new conversion, right? I have most of my Scrum teams has a minimum of 2 developers. Okay, so 2 of them can actually be in the same code base, and they can be on the same thing. So they have their own individual sandboxes that they play in, and when they are done, their code is on a hourly basis checked into the development area. Okay, automatically they're checked in, and development automatically will run. Okay, and then it'll integrate the 2 guys' code together into one. All right. And the development area is where we test to make sure that integration between the 2 folks' code, or the however many people's code, actually runs well and doesn't break anything else, right? Because they're developing in silos. So when I merge them together, they still need to work properly. So that's what the development area is for. Okay. And in our development area, I have the dev area, but then I also have the QA area, which are 2 totally different schemas. Okay, because developers are constantly updating their code on a hourly basis or even on a daily basis. But my QA team, they're not. They're checking certain things, right? It takes time for them to check the data. So they don't want their environment constantly refreshed every hour. I can tell you the QA folks will go crazy if I constantly update their environment every hour. Okay, because they're testing something, they're running a query, and kaboom, the data changes. Wow, right? You have to start all over again. They're not going to like me. So that's why we have a different environment for them. And then we have a different environment for UAT, because UAT is where our users come in and play with it. And those are only updated after every sprint. Okay. So after every sprint, then you would update those, because again, we don't want them in our process until the end of the sprint. So therefore, that's why we have so many different environments. Okay. Now, that's all for development. That's not for production. Production, I have on a totally different server. Okay. Why? Because someone asked me the question earlier yesterday, how many records do you develop with, and how many records do you do, do you bring in the whole database, especially if you have a database that's like 1 terabyte, or in my case, 10 terabytes, right? Heck no. To develop, there's no way I'm going to, develop off of a 10 terabyte database and redeploy that every hour and rerun the entire conversion every hour. No way, no way, no way, no way. In our development environment, we typically do a random slice of 10,000 patients, right? Because it's for development. In QA, it can go up to 100,000 to 500,000 patients. In UAT, it can go up to 1 million patients. We go by patients. We don't go by size or anything like that. We just go by patients. And the reason for that up step is then the developers does a certain amount, they'll find a certain amount, but then QA can potentially find more anomalies in the data, and then UAT can find more. Production is when we run everything, the whole thing. Only when I move into production will we run the entire thing. Okay. And in production, and all the quality checks that we do along the road are identical. Okay. So in every environment, the same checks get checked every single time. Okay. And then production is a totally different box, because again, there's a schedule for those, and they execute on their own. And why I separate them from the analytics, because like I said, we have some databases that are 10 terabytes big, okay, has over 300 million patients or something like that. Pretty much the whole US sits in that kind of thing, okay. The analytics team likes to run a lot of analytics, and some of their awesome R code takes like 2 days to run, okay, and they take up the entire server. Okay, both the R server and the database server. Well, I can't have production running at the same time as that, because then I get 2 different people emailing me going, excuse me, someone's taking up all the bandwidth. Can you guys go check? Right? And then I have to go in, the development team has to go in, or the production support team has to go, who in the world is running something? And then we have to reprioritize. So that's why we don't have those 2 environments as the same. We separate our production environment. And for us, we use AWS. I don't know about what you guys use. And a feature, with all the different cloud-based systems that's cool about it is you can stand them up and then you can shut them down. Okay. So our production environments are only stood up when I need them. I don't have to pay for them and have a really hefty server out there. And it's sitting there doing nothing, right? I don't have that. So we have AWS. So when I need the production ones, they come up. Some of them are huge. I put a lot of resource on them so that they can run fast, and then I shut them down. Okay. And then everything moves to the analytics. The analytics, I don't need them as powerful. Well, depends. Maybe sometimes my boss tells me to, increase the size for a certain analysis. But most of the time, I don't need them as powerful as my production ones. Right. But this way, they're not stepping on each other's toes. Now, the one downside to that is I do have to run it on production and then move it over. But that also helps, because then because I have a lot of very excited data scientists that loves to play with the newest and greatest stuff. Okay. So if they know that it's out there, they're going to start going in there. And this has happened before when we're moving it over. They're like, oh, the new version of this data is out. Let me go check it out. Let me go play with it. We're not done loading it. Stop it. Don't go in there. Don't go messing with it. We're not finished loading. Okay. So they get like that. So the question is, do I use the components like Glue and EMR for data? No, we don't at this point in time. When we first started using AWS, we were only using it for the storage component, and all of our code is written in SQL. So because it's worked for us, we've not gone back and looked at the newest features that are now available in AWS, because they weren't available for a while, right? A lot of these are now new. But I know the team is now looking at some of that stuff. Yeah, I do use Redshift. And we're looking at things like Snowflake as well, because Snowflake, from what I understand, is actually processing a lot faster than AWS can, and we've done a POC on it. And I think my POC, it cut it by almost 80%, Snowflake, the processing time. So we are looking at potentially moving, you're still using Redshift, but underlying it would be Snowflake that actually runs the database stuff. So those are some of the stuff that we are looking at. But yeah, so that's why I have all these separate environments. Now, I do actually have a separate R environment as well. So in our group, I do have an R server. I know R is free, and most of you guys probably have R on your laptops, but it does take a lot of power to run. And like I said, because of the amount of data we have and the amount of people that we have an actual dedicated R server that's been beefed up for them to run all kinds of crazy things on it. And within our R server, what we do set up is everybody, because one of the questions that we get is, if I get an R server, that means, and with Odyssey, there's always new packages that I have to install, and that people can't install it and only the admin can. So the way we've worked around that is everybody has a home directory, and within the home directory, they're their own admins inside that home directory. So in the home directory, you can install anything you want. If you want to install a package that's across the board, then you have to have the admin do it. But if you're only installing a package locally to yourself in that home directory, then you can do that. So that's how we've gotten around this whole having it on people's computers. Like I said, some of the ones that they run, they take a while. And if I put it on a laptop, someone might not be working for 2 days. They may just sit there and stare at their laptop for 2 days. Can't even check emails, right? So that's how we go around all that. So we have a lot of that stuff going on. The other thing that we spit out that you see here, that's supposed to be a native, that's supposed to be in our vocabulary files. So we spit all this out as well, because a lot of our folks wants to always see the latest and greatest. We export the vocabulary to other groups as well, so that they can see what we've mapped things to and all that fun stuff. So we do a lot of that. And then what I'm going to show you, let's see, where is it? It's right here. So my Redshift decided to die because it knows that I'm going to demo it today. So it decided, I'm not going to work for you. I'm sorry. So one of my developers helped me install this thing called Visual Studio Code, where I can use as a side thing to check it. So there's some stuff that we do. We have naming conventions that we have that we make sure that we abide by. So these are some of your ETL, standard coding stuff, right? So all of our databases, if it's development, always starts with DEVL. So I know this is a development environment. Anything that's prod always starts with PROD, right? Anything that's my analytics starts with something else. So we have prefixes that helps us better when I stare at something, where it is and what it should be. So you can see here, I'm staring at my development environment. And inside my development environment, I have multiple schemas as well, right? So even down here, I have different schemas that, come on, make this bigger. I've not used this in a long time. So you can see I have sandbox schemas in here. I have monthly updates. I have a full versus I have a dev, right? So see, we name things differently so that we know. So this is the full. So here I'm playing with the full for some reason. Versus sometimes I don't play with the full. Like these don't say full, so they're not the whole thing, right? And what we always do is date everything, because like I said, we do quarterly refreshes. So we always date our schema names to match which quarter I'm in, or what the, a lot of these actually isn't the quarter name, it's actually what the data is up to. Because like claims in the United States is always 6 months behind, right? So that's why this one says March of 2018, because it's 6 months behind. I processed this probably in September, right? Because it's always 6 months behind. So this allows me to quickly see what I'm dealing with, where my data goes up to and which data asset I'm talking about. And we have different schemas for ETL versus where the actual data will sit. So this is the ETL schema where the guys are doing all their ETLs. So again, we have normal naming conventions. I don't know if you guys can see it. If it's too small, I apologize. I don't know how to make this thing bigger. Okay. But we have naming conventions. So F stands for fact tables. HP stands for LK stands for lookup. So sometimes we have lookup tables, right? We have HPs, which stands for helper tables. We have temp tables that says temp in it. So we have a naming convention that we typically use for all of our development. And these are things that, you know, if you've done database development, that you probably would have in your group. I don't know how many of you guys have done that, so that's why I'm showing it to you. Now, the other thing why I'm coming in here, I want to show you is that what I mentioned yesterday, we do the source to concept mapping as well, which is what Chan showed you guys with Usagi, right? It can create that source to concept mapping table, right? Which you can see here is very similar. And all these are all your custom mapping, right? Hopefully it'll show up. Yeah. So all of these are the custom mapping that you do. So like I mentioned, our specialty, there is no, this is just the name of it. And then I have to basically map it to what it should be, right? There's the code, there's the description, and then I have where the target is, right? So, and there's the target concept ID. So we have things like that. We have other things in here that are not just specialty. You can see there's more in here. But we have those, and then we have our standard ones, which are up here, right? You have your concept relationship, and your concept ancestor, and your concept ancestor tables, your concept synonyms. So when you're doing ETL, you typically have to join both of them because you don't know where that medical code is that you need to map over and figure out what it maps to, right? So, and I can tell you to write that into your ETL logic to go over this every single time because the concept table has over like 5 million concepts in there. If you don't index it, it will take you forever. So we don't do that. We don't do any of that. So what my team does is what they've done is every single database that they do, because the other thing that is in the concept table is it has everything. It has even concepts that you don't care about. Like if you're in Australia, you don't really care about the US NDC drug names, right? You don't care about the read codes that are in UK, okay? So what we've done is we create what we call a different table called the helper table. Okay, this is the helper table. It looks very similar to that source to concept map table, except what this table has in it is a lot different than what you normally would expect. What we've done is we've written a query and create a table and only pull in my source to concept that's up here, right, this table, and all the vocabulary out of the concept relationship table using the maps to that I care about for this particular database ETL, right? So then there's a table in here you see because this is US claims. I care for ICD-9. I care for, let me go to that other one. I care for CPT, I care for HCPCS, I care for NDC numbers, and I care for all of these special ones that I have. Okay, these are all the source vocabularies that I care for. I don't care for your GEM scripts. I don't care for your, DNIs that are in Canada, your ATMs that are in Australia, or the NCCDs that are in China. Okay, I don't care for any of those. So my table now is filtered down to just the ones I care for and what they map to. Okay. So this table has everything and what they map to already in a linear, in one record, as one record. So this one maps to this particular field. Here's the source column, and then here's what it maps to, and here's where the target vocabulary is, here's where the target domain is. So the team uses this table only. They don't have to go and write a query against the concept table and then interjoin it to the concept relationship table, then interjoin that back to the concept table to get the target and the source, right? I don't have to do any of that. It's all already calculated. It's already pre-populated as a table. So then the ETL just uses this. It's a lot faster and it's a lot easier. And even for people, when they're looking at this, when they're starting to actually work in this particular database, this table also exists. So then they can query this table. So all my researchers can just query this one table and not, again, have to know how to do those joins, okay, and let it take like forever to run. So that is one thing I want to show you guys that is very useful, that you guys may want to think about when you are doing ETL conversions. And not just on ETL conversions, but even when you're researching it. So if you're not using Athena and you guys are using the database, creating something like this for your researchers will come in a lot more handy, because then they can query this thing. You index it against all of them and kaboom, it works a lot better. Okay. Any questions on that? And how, I mean, it is a bunch of joins. The query itself is just a bunch of joins. I see no. So again, we kind of talked about this already with the flow, but these are the 3 different type of steps that we do, so I won't go any more into that. Now, ETL implementation, like we mentioned, there are certain things you want to start off with first. And the person table is pretty much the first one that we always start off with, because again, person exists everywhere, right? Because the CDM, the person is it's patient-centric, so it's always going to be needed. So we always start with the person table. And again, depending on your database and depending on what you have, because these are foreign keys, there are foreign keys in here to these guys, right? If you have that data, create these guys first. If you don't, then go down to these guys. Now, some of them you don't, because like I mentioned earlier, if you're in a hospital data asset, your observation period, you're not going to have until you process all of these, because it's the start date and the end date, right? So you would process that at the end. You just leave it blank and then go back. Visit occurrence, same thing. Sometimes you know when the visit is, and then these are tied to the visit occurrence. If you don't, then what you do is put the visit occurrence as 0 and just still process all of these, and then write the logic to go back and populate the visit occurrence once you figure out what their visit is. Same thing with visit details. So those are things you want to keep in mind, and make sure that you go based on what it is that your data allows you to do, because not everybody has that same type of environment, okay? And your data is very different. So this is just a step that I want to show you about loading the source data to the staging tables. The DDLs, I already showed you yesterday where you can get the DDLs. So you can get the DDLs for all of the OMOP CDM up to version 5.3 out in the Odyssey GitHub repository. I think I shared that yesterday, but I will show you where to get that again. So in here, if you go to GitHub and if you go to the common data model here, you will see that all of the DDLs are here. So if you're in Redshift, you just need to click on this, and there's the DDL, so you can download all of that, right? Same thing with any of these other ones. So these are all the ones we support right now. Snowflake is being looked at, and Snowflake, because we've been talking to them, they are willing to invest in actually setting themselves up to be compatible with Odyssey. So probably by the end of the year, you may see Snowflake as part of this as well. And one of the questions that got asked earlier is, which platform do we use, right? Again, Odyssey and OMOP is database platform and technology independent. It's really just a, I shouldn't say just, it's a structure. It's an OMOP, it's a CDM structure, as well as standardized vocabularies. How you implement it really depends on your organization's needs. Now, some people ask me questions like, why don't I use tools like Informatica, right? That's very popular when it comes to ETL. Or another one is Sagent. And then there are free ones out there like Talend that you can utilize. And when we first started doing a lot of these ETL conversions, we did look at some of those stuff, and I still, you know, my team constantly does look at that stuff. Number one, things like enterprise licenses such as Impala or Informatica or Sagent are really expensive. They're in the millions. So unless your company already has it, you know, and you can afford it, good luck with that, right? The second thing is the free source ones, like Talent, does not meet the requirements that I'm looking for because I run multiple I need to be able to run multiple instances of it all at the same time, and Talent does not allow for that, right? So we've looked at some of that stuff, and we've looked at some of this stuff like the AWS stuff or the Azure stuff, or even within Snowflake and Google BigQuery and Hadoop, they have tools that we can utilize. But one of the things why we don't use it is because within our group, we deal with a lot of different folks as well, other academic institutions, other clients who has their data in different systems. So we don't tie our group down to one system because we try to develop a methodology that can be applied in any environment, right? So that's why we don't use a system, because if I use a, you know, tool like Informatica, then I'm tying my group down and any type of client or academic collaboration or government collaboration down to Informatica. And that's why we don't use something like that. Again, that's up to the organizational choice. That's the way we operate because of my business needs and my client needs and my, you know, research needs. So our folks know a little bit about everything, and our process can be set up in any of those environments. So my folks will work with them to set that process up in that environment that way. So that's why we don't use a tool. Okay, but again, doesn't mean you guys cannot, right? So it's up to your organization and what you want to do. So you can see here, one of the things what I want to mention here and why we're showing this slide is the vocabulary. So the vocabulary, as you know, gets updated all the time. Every time you do a refresh, every single time that you want to bring in data, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you download the latest and greatest vocabulary. Okay. And that when you are inside your system, because the vocabulary tables, that vocabulary, actual vocabulary table will tell you what release it is, keep track of what release you're on. Okay, because that's very important for research and that's very important for people talking the same as you, especially when we are doing COVID research, right? One of the things that we do is we're constantly updating with new COVID tests, with new COVID terminology, like the Delta strand, right? There's going to be a new code for that, a new test for that. So we're constantly updating our vocabulary. So therefore, when you want to do research with us, you want to make sure you have the latest and greatest vocabulary because things may change, right? Or when you're refreshing your data. Don't refresh your data using the old one. Always bring in the newest one because you may catch things, new things may be added that you don't know about, okay? So really, that's really what I want you to take away from this particular slide is about loading that, and that you will always have to deal with custom vocabulary, right? I've not met anyone yet that does not have some kind of vocabulary that is not in the one of the standard ones that are out there, okay? Or even one of the ones that are inside Athena. Everybody always has their own. So make sure you go and figure out what your custom vocabulary is and have a method to load that. Sorry, Mui, can you say a word where to download the most? Yes. So to download the latest and greatest, it is out in Athena, so where I was earlier, right? So Athena is a browsing tool, but it's actually where the vocabulary team maintains the vocabulary. So athena.com, athena.odyssey.org is free. You can go there. If you've never come to it, when you first start up, it's going to ask you to accept this whole SNOMED thing. And I understand that there's the other debate of SNOMED is not out there and not available for everybody in the country, right? Now, Odyssey has worked with SNOMED International to grant Odyssey a research license anywhere you are, as long as you're doing Odyssey research. Okay, so if your country does not have SNOMED as a license, that's okay. If you're doing Odyssey research, they are allowing that. That's why you can allow to download it. And how we track that is in this download tab. That's why you have to log in because we have to track the people and what country they're from, right? And we give that information back to SNOMED when they want to know. Okay, so yes, we do sell your data. Sorry. I'm just joking. We do not sell your data. But we do have to sometimes justify back to SNOMED who is downloading, because you know, we don't want to get into legal problems with all of these different folks to say, hey, blah blah blah. That's why we have things like the ones that require you'll get an email and we require you to show us proof that you actually have it. So there's a whole group that and a whole system that works. Okay, we do not sell your data, please. I'm joking there, but we do need to identify who you are. Okay, but you can download it here. When you download it, they do have release notes. There is actually also on GitHub. If you go to the vocabulary, folks, if I go back here, if you want to know what's being released, you can go to the vocabulary people. So here, v5.0, they have a list of issues here. You can see all the issues that they're working on, and they are typically tied to a release. So you can come in here. So one of the things, if you have a vocabulary problem, you can put it in the forums, or you can actually put it in the issue like here, right? So here, Odyssey device vocabulary improvement. So this was open June 4th, and Vortex really is into devices and measurements. But you can see there's a lot here. They have in here, you can also find what their release notes are, and they tell you about when they released. So here, 6 days ago, they released something. This is the latest and greatest, and you can click on this, and you'll be able to find the release notes, what's new. So the gem script, the vocabulary, there's a bug that's been fixed. Additionally, they made changes to here, blah, blah, blah. Some of the domain changes, some of the new ones, some of the concept changes. Now, do they go down in detail? Because one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, can you give me a list? What was changed, the delta? I'm like, no, that's just a lot of work, and this team doesn't get paid enough. Okay, so they track it at a high level, like here. If you really, really, really want it, I'm sure if you talk to them, they may be able to give you some of that information, but they only tell you at a high level what has been changed and what has not been changed. They will not do a delta to show you what was from the previous release to the current release. If you want to do that, you have to do that yourself. And I see a hand that's up, Stephen. Is there something you would like to ask?
Yes, I have some question. Want to ask you that and wait a moment. I want to go see the floor, the step about the ETL development first on your PowerPoint.
So like this one.
Next one.
This one.
The DDL one.
Yeah. This. Oh, this one. Oh, sorry. This one.
Yeah, this one. So I have so first of all that we need to convert our source data into CDM structure. Then we prepare that when we prepared it, then we will do the step 1 using the DDL to create the table, and then we put the CDM structure but from our source data into that space.
So you create two, right? There's two. Let me go. Actually, you guys have it in the box. So the box actually has an example of it. So I'll go to the box instead of my own. Right? If you go to the box and you go to pgadmin, okay, and if you were in the, if you go into the localhost one, okay.
Yes.
I know I've gone over, but oh well, Jing, we're going to go over and then take a break. Okay. If you go in here, databases under ETL, actually even both of them. Let's see, where is it? So you'll see that there's the raw Lauren in here. So you first have to load the raw one, like you said, right? Which is the source data. So you load all the source data tables in here. So these are all the source data tables. Then what you do is you create, using the DDL that you download from the GitHub repository, you create the CDM schema as well. So you'll see here, these are the CDM schemas, right? So there are two different schemas. One is your raw, and then one is your CDM.
Yes. So the CDM one is just put the DDL to construct the CDM structure.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
This is one. And another one is our raw data. So we need to convert our raw data into the
Correct.
similar structure and then put it into your first space.
Yes, correct. So, you know, so that's why the steps here is number one, create your DDL, create your tables for your source data and load it in, right? Hopefully you have a DDL or you're going to have to write all of that. The second one is what we didn't put in here is actually create the CDM, right? DDL, but that only does the DDL. But the other thing you have to do, that's why we're saying you have to load the vocabulary, right? You have to load the Odyssey vocabulary, and that's where you would get the vocabulary. The DDL has the, give me 1 second. Sorry, I tell my husband what time I'm allowed dinner. So he goes exactly to that time. So my kid comes up and says, "Mommy, Daddy says it's dinner time." So I'm like, "You're gonna have to wait now, kid." But you have to load basically in here. What you would first load, right, is these tables, all the data in there. Then you create this CDM, a shell of it, with the DDLs that you have. But then what you load next is the vocabulary tables, and that's what you would load from Athena, right? All of these vocabularies. That's what you would then load. Those would be the steps for loading your environment, right? Then the next step, like you said, is actually then developing the ETL code. And by you loading the environment for your team, then your data experts and your CDM experts can go in there and now analyze the data and create what we did yesterday, right? Which is all the white rabbits, the usagis, and the rabbit in the hat to do the analysis. And then your developers then can come in and actually do the code development, okay? So, and then you would run your process to actually finish the, to do that. And I'll show you in a second how we do it. I'll show you how our environments are set up. Again, this is just how we set it up. Doesn't mean that you have to set it up the same way, right? It's just us showing you guys how we do that. So does that answer all your questions?
Yes, I'm more clear about the process about to convert it. And I have another question that because I have downloaded the vocabulary from Athena, and I know that the one of the vocabulary, one coding system is called CPT, right?
Yep.
And it's and the OMOP and the procedure standardized code is mostly based on the CPT. But when I download a vocabulary, they have separate data called concept and the concept CPT. So should we need combine it together first, or I just use it directly because I cannot see the vocabulary table which called the concept CPT.
Yeah, there's no vocabulary table called concept CPT. There's just a concept table. And for particularly the, let me find the actual tutorial. This is the tutorial. For the procedure table, it's a mess because it's not just one standard and there is no standard for it. And there's multiple standards in there. So let me find this deck. If you were in, this is last year's training, so I got to go find the, I'm scrolling a little fast. So hierarchy-wise, if you look at it, we're looking at, so hierarchy, right? Exploring the, whoa, yo, mouse, be nice to me. Where are you anyways, mouse? Sorry, sometimes my system doesn't want to work the way I want it to work. So if we look at the hierarchy, so I think some of the folks showed you yesterday, right? This is our condition hierarchy. So everything maps to SNOMED. And then the classification that's tied to it, you can see here is MEDRA. Yes. And then all the other ones are considered non-standard, right? And then the next one is drugs. My mouse really doesn't want to work today. Drugs right now, it's RX norm and RX norm extension, and then ATC and CVX are the drug classes. There used to be a bunch of other ones, but they're looking at getting rid of that. But then when you go to things like measurements, there's actually some of them that has a hierarchy, some of them that don't.
Yes.
So like in this case, you have some that are joint hierarchies and then some that aren't. And then procedures, it's a mess, okay? So
Oh,
there is a working group that is talking about how to standardize, maybe even into more. So there's CPT, HCPCS, SNOMED CT, ICD-10 PC procedures, as well as ICD non-proc as the standards. So really the standard procedures goes across all 5 of those. So it's not one particular one. And CPT and HCPCS are really mainly in the United States. Those are 2 that we use inside the United States, and then the other 3 are more international. So therefore, you have to look at your mapping. It may map to one of these 4. But there is no table called concept_CPT, or there is only a table called concept. And in there, in that concept table, so if we went and looked at that concept table, right, select start from concept where domain ID equals procedure. And what is that field name called? I can't remember all my field names. That's my local. Go back here. Oh, nope. Go back here. Go in here. Tables. Concept. Where's my concept table? And I want my columns. The column I'm looking for is standard concept. That's what it is. And standard concept equals S. And I don't want that. I want to, oh yes, select distinct. Oops, over here. Distinct. I'm looking for vocabulary. Let's see if I can remember how to write SQL. Okay. I don't do this on a daily basis anymore. So, I don't get anything. Maybe because, let's see. Select this
procedure. The spelling.
Yeah, I might be spelling it wrong. So that's what I'm looking for. Select the domain ID from concept. So I need to see what I could be spelling it wrong. I'm really good at spelling, or bad at spelling. Box. Can anybody see the word? Yeah, I spelled procedure right. Did I not spell procedure right? I did spell procedure right.
Yeah.
Procedure. Yeah.
The procedure was
You
not
got the
spelled correctly.
way around.
I didn't spell it correctly.
Yeah, it's POICE, not EC. The 5th.
Thank you. I'm telling you, I'm not good at spelling. Okay, I use English as my second language as a joke. But yeah, I'm going to use that right now. So you can see that's what you do, right? So like these are all the standard procedure codes, the procedure vocabulary that exists inside the concept table. Now again, mine is old, or the vocabulary that's in here is old versus what you saw in the deck. There is a 5th one, right? ICD-10 procedure codes are also in here. So if you have problems loading the vocabulary table, let us know, because maybe I can have some of your one of my folks help you properly load that table, because maybe you're not loading it properly into your database.
So basically, in our database that we use ICD-10. So all of the CPT code, I can ignore them, right?
You may want to run that. So again, one of the things that we do is we run that, run all your ICD-10 codes against that to see which vocabulary it maps to, because maybe some of them might map to CPT. I don't know. You would have to run that through. I wouldn't say that yes, it all doesn't go that way. And
Okay.
thank you, Jacob, for telling me that I spelled it wrong, but I didn't look at your chat. So sorry.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So, is it okay if I go another 15 minutes before we go on break so that at least I know where the heck to stop? Everybody okay with that? I see a thumbs up. Thank you. That's all I need. I won't shut up. All right. So again, in my group, we do a staging table. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, we go and create these things called staging tables. That's where you saw those fact tables and those lookup tables and everything, right? because for us, we find that that's a lot easier. That, like I mentioned earlier, about 80% of the rules may be different, but then there's a certain percentage of the rules that are not different, that are repeated. So then when I load those in, I don't have to rewrite those rules. Those are generic rules that I can use. Stephen, your hand is up. I don't know if it was meant to be up or should it go down. So sorry, I see your hand is still up. Okay. I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. So that's something we do. Now, the other thing, so here, how you load the staging tables, right? Again, I'm not going to go over a lot of this because I'm going to show you basically how we do things. Now, again, we actually have different coding standards in place. We actually have a bunch of QAs, a bunch of validations, and a bunch of stuff that we do per table and per sprint. And then we do all of it again at the end because, like I mentioned, we have the different environments. So when I'm in the dev environment, and because they're developing maybe just the person table or the drug exposure table, it's not going to check everything in the CDM. But when I get to QA and UAT, and as I continue to build this and into prod, I need to make sure all the checks still pass again, right? So we constantly are checking and constantly are doing that. So what I'm going to show you very quickly is how we code and how we do things. What happened to my, here we go. So my team, we don't use GitHub, at least not yet. We use, we're still outdated. We use SVN. So our group codes in SVN. It's just another code repository. So allowing you to store code and be able to version up, branch things out, as well as keeping a master version, okay? So you can see here, I'm giving away trade secret, a lot of the different types of data that we transform, okay? So what we have all the time, you can have branches, you can have tags, you can have trunks, okay? So branches are branching out your code. So for those that aren't familiar, so you have a master version, which is what we call the trunk. And then you may want to have a group start making changes, but then you're still running the refresh. So they would branch out. Okay, they would branch out into another branch, or they would put it into another tag. Okay, so they're coding while I'm refreshing at the same time. When they're done, then I can merge everything back in and test everything, right? So that's one of the cool things about using something like source control and making sure you have a master versus branches that you put out, okay? In our case, I'm going to look at the trunk, and then I'm going to look at how we actually do ETL. I will try to make this a little bit bigger because I know it's tiny, okay? So I'm going to go into the ETL. We actually have parameter files as well because of the fact that I have all the different environments, right? So the parameter files are used later on when I show you what Jenkins is, and it allows us to dynamically change my connection strings and change my configuration so that it knows to pick which one when I'm in the different environments. And that's how we get the whole automation set up, okay? I won't go into those. I'm just going to go into the ETL. So this is how ours is structured. Again, mine is all manual. You can build this all brand new, up to you. You can use systems for it. We don't, because then I can plop this onto any person's environment and it'll work. Okay, so what you showed earlier, what Stephen, we were asking about, right? DDLs. So step one is to create the DDLs. And you can see they're in a certain order. They're named in a certain order, right? 1000, 2000, 2001, 2000, 2100, because then this is the order I know to tell my continuous deployment software to be able to go pick it up. So here, this is setting up all the DDLs, setting up the source, setting up the vocabulary, setting up the CDM, the lookup tables, my amendments, my QA, my validation, so on and so on. So I have a whole series of things I have to set up, okay? And again, a lot of these are repeated, okay? Like all these down here are repetitive. The only one that I would change is the source DDL, right? Everything else is repetitive. Here's my script for copying the data over from the source. Okay, script for custom mapping and how to build the custom mapping. We have a whole process for that. I can go on for probably a week on how we do all that, okay? Copying over the vocabulary, loading all the lookup tables, because in your original source data, you may have lookup tables, like in one of our databases, the codes are in one and then there's a lookup table to it, so we have all that. Vocabulary amendment goes with the custom table, and then I go into loading the facts the dimension tables, like I said earlier, and then the fact tables, right? So my connection is private and my password has expired. Okay, give me a second. I have to go find my password. I don't know. I can't keep all my passwords. Oh, I know what this is now. Ah, it's this. Yay. So here you can see with this one, we're loading in certain ones. We have this XML built because that's how we tied this to Jenkins. But again, that's a whole process that I would have to take a long time to show you guys, so I won't go into it. So you can see we have scripts in here. We're loading the location, the care site, the provider, person tables, right? And then the fact tables, you'll see there's a bunch more in here. So the first thing you see, we create these helper tables, and these are all against the vocabulary, right? You'll see that we load visit occurrence. There's different events that we use, the dosage stuff, the drug error. So you'll see we have a lot of scripts in here. These are all of our scripts that we use to load everything, and they're in order. They're all in a certain order based on that particular database, this conversion, okay? And then you'll see we have fixes, and then there's the QA. So there's a bunch of quality checks that we have. You can see here, we do a bunch of quality checks, and we keep building them as we go. This is a completed version, okay? If you're not completed, you won't see this show up until it's written, right? So, but what you see here is a fully completed version. That's why you see them in here. Then we generate what we call internally demo statistics. So that's something our team does. This is statistics that we run to make sure our data, like I have a count of the Cdm tables versus a count of the original source tables, and there's a comparison, my mapping percentages, and all of that. So unit testing, that's what this QA is. So a lot of that is built into this. So our unit tests as well as our regression tests typically are all the same. Okay, you build it once, and then you actually rerun it as part of our regression test, because again, a lot of these are off of the now the source ones, they're not, but the CDM ones, they're always the same, right? I'm always checking the same things. Did I meet my foreign key constraints? Did I have visits? Did I have people that are born in the future? So all of those are part of scripts that we already have built through the fact that we've done this so many times. So that's what a lot of these are. Okay, so that's what we do. So as you can see, the similar structure exists in many of my other databases. So you can see here, if I click on this one, it's exactly the same structure. You may see a few other ones in here that are unique because I have to slice things out, but you can see the structure is very much similar. Okay, so we set this structure up. Every single one has a parameter file. There's these HTML files in here, and that's because what we utilize that for is inside my automated deployment tool. Okay, so we have an automated deployment tool called Jenkins. This is open source. This is free. You can download this yourself as well. Again, I like using a lot of free software because then that keeps my cost down. Okay, we run a business, so I always have to keep the cost down. Okay, because I get asked, how come you guys are using so much space? How come you guys are using so much X, Y, and Z? Well, okay, fine. But this is Jenkins. You can download it. It's free. You can add it up. There are user guides. There is an open source community that shows you how to utilize this whole thing, right? So we have it set up where all of these didn't go so well. These are bad runs. But it tells you that I did an Achilles runs and it took us 47 minutes. I can click on this to show you which one it was if I wanted to look at it. So I can click on it and who ran it and why, as well as looking at the build information, right? So I can actually go look at the build information, look at the output console if I wanted to. But all of our projects are in here. Everything is available in here. So if, for example, I want to look at one of these runs that they did not too long ago, or even look at like them doing it on all my different projects, because I have a lot of different projects in here, right? So like this is an ambulatory EMR run that somebody did that they failed, that they shouldn't do. But you can check on one of these things and you can click on it like here. has the different environments, like I showed you, QA, UAT, prod, master, so we can create new ones all over the place. So if I go into prod, you can see I have different runs of this one, an unload script that they unloaded the whole CDM, took them an hour and 45 minutes. Again, it's a script that's already built in because we already have all of that, right? So again, I can go look at this guy and I can actually look at the parameters, actually not there, the config file, and see what was actually built in and which script did they do. So this is a down conversion end-to-end process. Somebody built this in, and this is the repository where it sits. This points to my SVN repositories and the different tags that are there. And then down here is basically, if I go down a little further, what they ran. Right, so it tells me a lot of information that they ran this particular one. The job somewhere down here, if I go down eventually further, maybe not, but somewhere in here, it's supposed to tell me all the different ones that I ran. So it seems like they only ran a certain one, just that one unload script. So that's it. But normally it would tell me if I ran a bunch of other ones, which ones was added, and here's the credentials for it and all that. So again, this can be scheduled. So once you set it up, so for example, these things are set up. Once you set it up once, you can have it put on a schedule. So you actually have in here, you can actually do a whole schedule. My team, we don't schedule these. We some of the stuff we schedule, but some of these we don't, because I don't know all the time when I might get the file. But once I get the file, then they hit the run button and then the whole thing runs, right? It pauses for certain things and it does certain things. So like this one, it's automated here, automatically updating the vocabulary all the time. So that's how we, in a nutshell, without going into a lot of details, basically use SQL, but then automate things where it goes through all my different environments. Does that help to explain like how we do things? So we do also do code reviews. So the teams do go through code. The way we write code, we again have certain standards in place. We always make sure like we have comments at the top, right? So my group always does commenting at the top and they put comments. We actually use Jira as well as our agile process. So one of the things in Jira, you have backlog ticket items. So sometimes when they're making changes to the code, they put that in the code up here in the comments area to say this is made changes because of this particular Jira one, right? When you showed the merger of various vocabulary table, is it used with Usagi to help? No, it's not. It's for the ETL process. So when I showed you the whole various vocabulary tables in the merger, it's for the ETL process. Because again, you don't want to run the concept table and your concept relationship table as well as your source to concept table one at a time, querying those tables one at a time for every record. So we originally started with a view, but we found out that the view still takes a long time because it's constantly refreshing, right? So that's why we created a physical table. So that helper table is actually a physical table that's indexed. And it makes our process a lot faster when I actually run through the ETL conversion. Okay. That's what we use that table for. It's not anything to do with Usagi. Usagi populates that source to concept mapping table, and that's what we have as well. But then we create a helper table on top of that that uses that structure, but it combines the concept table, concept relationship table, where the relationship ID equals maps to, and only picks the vocabulary that are relevant to my data asset, because I have data assets in France, Germany, you saw earlier, maybe Japan, in the US, in many different places. So I ignore all the other vocabularies that don't exist in those locations, right? So that's what that table is for. So again, we do a lot of code development and I'll do a lot of reviews, and we do have a lot of standards and we enforce them. Part of our code review is to enforce those coding standards, because I know everybody likes their own style. I have my own style as well, even when it comes to documentation, right? But there are guidelines we have to follow. So that's what we do during our code review. Okay. Some best practices. again, we do a lot. Again, our folks, we run a business. We are a commercial entity. So part of the demand that I have on my team is, how do you improve your efficiency? So part of their goal every year is, can you improve it another 10%? Can you improve it another 10%? They get mad at me, okay? But it's part of our business, right? We're always, if I don't push, then there's no innovation, right? You're always looking for more innovation. So they always are looking for better best practices. How do you, better run your code execution? Like I talked about earlier, that helper table. At first, we didn't do that, but then we looked at places where our performances can go up, and then you can improve upon that. So you look at your code execution, that structure that I showed you earlier with the way that we have our SVN set up, that whole process was evolving. We evolved into that now. After 5.5 to 6 years of it, that's how we evolved. Okay, we weren't experts. We were just like you guys to begin with. When I first started with this group, I was a data analyst, and I knew enough to be dangerous. So I helped design this whole system out. Okay, and then that's when I took over the whole thing, and I said, we're all going this way. Okay, like it or not, this is the way we're going. Maybe it doesn't work for you guys. I don't know. But that's how we've done it, and we've kind of stuck to it for now. Again, you have coding documentation. We have wiki sites that has, we have a wiki site that talks about privacy, that talks about how to use the data, that talks about some of the general hiccups that you get and all that. So we have a lot of that in place. But again, those require time to develop. So those are best practices, not only just for coding, but for project management, right? So we have a bunch of wiki sites. We have knowledge sharing at times. I used to start an education series where I had everybody attend to better understand like what everybody else is doing. Again, coding standards as well as code reviews. So these are things you want to put in place if you want to be effective. I'm not saying you have to have it, because again, you guys may be a small organization, right? I'm just giving you what some of the best practices are that are out there. Okay. I already kind of went through version control, so I will just skim through this a little bit. Again, why you use it, because of all the reasons that I talked about earlier. Mistakes, merging. It is a pain in the behind when people are stepping on each other's toes and when you don't have a method to merge. Okay. Source control allows you to do that, allows you to see the differences side by side, really cool. So one of the reasons why I really push that, if you guys are doing it, make sure you use version control, right? GitHub, GitLab, they're all free. Go out there and use one of them, okay? How you do it, again, depends on how you guys do it. My team does it a certain way. I just showed you how my team does it with the different branches and also with the chunks and all of that fun stuff, okay? Again, we use SVN, go to GitLab, go to GitHub. Those are all available. Odyssey has it. You can even put it in Odyssey if you want. Just ask the Odyssey folks, can I have a new repository? They'll let you, they will let you, okay? So some of the technical resources that are out there, always look at the Odyssey website. Wiki site, there is a wiki site for it. Now, like I said, we have our own wiki site for everything. My whole team has a whole wiki site, multiple wiki sites, okay? The data scientist team has their own standard procedures. The ETL team has their own standard procedures, how to set things up, how to whatever. So wiki sites are very useful, but they have to be maintained, okay? If you don't maintain them, good luck with that. I already showed you the GitHub repository to where a lot of this stuff is. The biggest, I would say, resource is the forums. Go out there and ask your questions in the forums. There is no such thing as a beginner question in the forum. I can tell you, the people that are out there, we are very, 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 very warm and very approachable people. We will answer anything you want. And like Chan showed you earlier, even if you're in the Korean one, someone from the global team will answer your question. Even if you sit in the Korean one, because what we do, and I can tell you they do this for a fact because I know Christian does this, Mark Time does this. They like to go see what's in the forum, and if you're in a different language, they like to see what the other guys are doing. So what they do in the forums when they do see the Korean threads, because it's down here, right? What they actually do is we stick all this into Google Translate and see what you guys are saying, and then we will reply if we have a reply in English. Okay, so they do that every now and then. But in here, as you can see, it's all Korean. but there are times when we will go in there and actually reply. And Shan kind of showed you yesterday that that he had a reply, right? But the forums is a great way. For CDM people, there is that CDM section right here. You can come in here and ask any type of questions. So a lot of people right now are talking about OMOP on fire, and I know we talked about that during the APAC community call, right? So a lot of this visit occurrence ID versus of the visit occurrence. So again, lots of stuff going on in here. Questions, you can just say, hey, I'm new, I don't understand. Some people will point you to reference documents. Some people will point you to previously discussed forum threads. Some people will point you to the wiki site. Some people will answer your question directly. But these guys are very, 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 very approachable people. They're constantly checking this stuff. Christian, for sure, is constantly checking this stuff. He finds it therapeutical to go into the forums. That's what he tells me. Okay. So I know I went over it by 36 minutes. I apologize. I know this one's not going to be that long. So we're going to give you guys an hour break here. And what I'm going to come back with is to give you exercises. Okay. So the next session, we're going to have you guys go and actually take what you've done in the White Rabbit in the Hat and try to map actual physical records to the OMOP CDM, but manually, not using any systems. We will show you how to do that when we come back. So again, I see that it's at the top of the hour. It's at 06, and maybe in Australia it's 36. But 1 hour break for lunch, for whatever it is, come back in an hour. Okay, everybody good? Cool, now I gotta go eat my dinner. I'll see you guys in an hour.